The Poet Laureate of Toronto currently is Albert Moritz, commonly known as Al, and he has written for us. The Art Bar is the longest continuously running poetry series in Canada and counts as a national treasure. Its fame is based on even more than the way it has provided the Canadian and the Toronto literary communities for decades with one of their best and best known venues. There is also the great and regular frequency of its programs. Every Tuesday evening, almost every week of the year, three and sometimes more readers are united with a responsive audience. There is the great interest of its programs. It has consistently looked for and presented the new and as yet unknown alongside mid career poets and veteran famous ones. Many are the little known writers, often as yet without books or even chapbooks, that audiences first encountered at the Art Bar and later in notable books and literary prize lists. In fact, the Art Bar's practice of inviting back unknown poets who gave vivid readings to be invited feature readers has been a prime stepping stone to prominence for many. Along with this, the Art Bar has been an engine for total inclusiveness from long before the pressure for inclusion was nearly as prominent as it is today. Poets of every place and race, every belief and sexuality, and every imaginable literary style have found a warm welcome at the Art Bar. And the audience the Art Bar attracts is just as inclusive. It is a venue where audiences and writers from all the different parts of the literary spectrum come together. There are few cultural institutions in Canada that combine historic significance and energetic newness as well as the Art Bar does. There are none that do it better or more importantly, so says Al Moritz very kindly.
You're here. Lovely words from Al, and here's to the togetherness that he's represented in Synecdoche in his response to this institution of 3 decades it's been now. I'm going to offer a word to begin us. Welcome to episode 7 of Talking with the Organizers, presented by Antler River Poetry, formerly Poetry London Online, this week featuring Art Bar with Margaret Code, and joined by Kathy Flaxman, who is going to pitch a story to the Toronto Star about the Art Bar, which began in 1991, and as Al said, has been the longest running continuous reading series in the country, with scarecrows around the country, recognizing the diverse nations in the country, as it's been thought of and known under the banner of Canada to this point. And it's moved through various instantiations, this reading series, from one location to another, and under the stewardship of a variety of different directors. And Margaret, I wonder whether you'd say a few words about how you got involved with the series and what drew you to becoming its director, as you currently are. And thank you for joining me.
It was a gradual process, and it's a pleasure to be here. I started out with an interest in writing poetry in 1995 and started attending the art bar at about that time. From the audience, I eventually took to reading poems on the open stage. And then I did some volunteer work for the art bar and stayed on for a number of years doing that. Eventually, our director, Rob Welsh, who preceded me, announced his resignation, and was very devastated when the art bar closed for a very brief period in June of 1919. No, 2019. um, and so I was set about looking for someone to replace him, and I approached several people, and I couldn't find anybody that would replace him. And finally, I realized that nobody was going to do it if I wasn't going to do it. So I stepped into the role at that time on more or less the default basis.
Mm. Wonderful. I appreciate it. Admire your pluck, because we must be the changes in the world sometimes that we are called for or require. So I wonder whether you'd say, over the course of your years writing poetry since the mid '90s, as you'd mentioned, and going to the art bar, reading at the open mics, and that sort of thing, what makes for a great reading? and what is it about the art bar environment that is conducive to the offering of great readings?
Well, we always have a venue that is seems to be supportive and work with us. That's very important. It's critical, actually. And there are several things that make a great reading. Um, Sometimes usually we will have maybe three feature readers at a live reading. We've been virtual for the past year and a half, and we've had, let me see, two feature readers at our virtual readings only, but most of the time it's three. And some kind of contrast between the main feature and other features. It makes for an interesting reading. Also, if you have two very strong readers, very senior poets, that can be very rewarding for the more senior poets in our audience. So that's another kind of interesting reading. And sometimes we have all newbies in a special night where we try to pick somebody to do a feature amongst newcomers who've never read on the stage before. So that's a fun evening too. You know, it can be fun in a lot of different ways. Um, uh, I wanted to say something else about that. Inclusiveness has an appeal to a wide audience, and while honoring our mission at the same time, and the other thing we do sometimes is weed out poets who might be saying something a little bit offensive when they read on the open mic, so that they're not back on the stage again. Other things that help are good food and service in a venue that pays attention to sound, light, temperature, and accessibility. That's important too. So there are a lot of components to a great reading.
Mhm.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure, Kat.
Yes.
I wanted to know, you said the new poets, when they have newer poets read, that was fun in a different way. And I was wondering what you meant.
Well, poets who've never been on the stage before, who are not that experienced poets, so their poetry is all over the map, and they're often quite nervous, and so we try to be supportive, and it's just a fun evening to see a bunch of fresh faces up there on the stage.
Are they all usually younger or older people or what? Or
Can be both, can be either one actually.
And Margaret, what is the transition of the reading series, perhaps temporarily, online been like for you? I suppose that you would have, begun as the director shortly after or around the same time that the pandemic broke out. Is that right?
Bef- Before the pandemic broke out,
Or, yeah.
and then within 2 weeks of everything shutting down, we had our first virtual reading. So we transitioned very quickly and with not without some growing pains.
I wonder if you'd say a word or two about those growing pains and what you've learned from that transition, whether they're things that you began by doing, which you've since discarded, or whether the things that you began not doing, but which you've grown towards and incorporated in the Art Bar online performances as they appear now.
Well, one thing we did differently for the virtual series is we had the readers read for half an hour each. We had two readers for half an hour each rather than three readers for 20 minutes each. So that's quite a lot of reading, and a lot of people found that
I,
quite significant. Um, and we were wondering if that was going to be able to be feasible to carry it on that way, but it did pan out all right. We're still doing it, and we haven't lost any poets yet. um, what else did I want to say? Maybe you have to come back to your question again.
Sure. Yeah. About the transition, things that you learned, perhaps,
Oh,
things that you
yes.
started.
Technology was a huge accomplishment to try and overcome. Because people would be sending in videos of half an hour's length, which was pretty long to send over the internet.
Mm.
And There are different ways to send it. We transfer YouTube, Dropbox, and Google Drive, and some of them work a little better than others. And so we had to have someone who was very patient and, if not pretty technically savvy, at the receiving end to help people do the transmitting. But it has worked out, and we've even gone through one transition from one technical person to the next, and we had only one major glitch along the way, I would say. I mean, we had tons of minor glitches, but only one major one.
Incidentally, and out of curiosity, I wonder which of those means of transferring large files has been most effective for you, or which you recommend. You mentioned WeTransfer, YouTube,
All
Google
the ones that
Docs.
I mentioned have been tried and true. Dropbox, Google Drive, WeTransfer, and YouTube.
Very good. Shifting gears a bit, I wonder whether you'd say a few words about your thinking through land acknowledgements in your position as a host.
Oh, yes. Well, the Art Bar has put together a code of conduct. It's a multi page printed document that we put some time and effort into. And it has one of its basic values is inclusivity. And so the land acknowledgement that we read at the beginning of our sessions, and we do read out the same one every week, is representative of our code of conduct. And we chose it very carefully because we wanted to have something that was well worded and widely accepted, and that's the one that we use. And Shanoya Pant, who's one of our loyal team members, has a video recording that we play at the beginning of all our virtual sessions, and when we go back to live sessions, the host for the evening will read it out.
Very good. And you mentioned team members there, and it makes me think that I hadn't asked you about the structure of the art bar, and I wonder how many people are involved in the series, and how does it go? I mean, like how do you have it function? Do you meet regularly online to discuss what's upcoming and ways in which to adapt to what's upcoming, or is it all done through email? Say, how many people are involved, and who are the ones that sort of carry the weight of the series?
There are about five of us involved, and each of us has our own functions. I tend to be the sort of pivotal person in the group, and I communicate a lot by email with the group. We did have one team meeting recently. We met at our old haunt, the Free Times Cafe, and lots of good ideas came forward, which we have followed up on. And I'm very grateful for the reliable and hardworking support of all of our team members. And I would like to name them right now: Suparna Ghosh, Brett Campbell, Daphne Arlato, Kathleen Orth. Those are the main ones, but we did have a lot of help from Rosa Arlato for a very long period during our virtual days.
And you mentioned Rob Welsh, the former director of the series, and I wonder if you'd say a word just as we're drawing to a close here about what makes for effective leadership in the arts and in arts communities, especially when that leadership is usually contingent on people offering of their time without expectation of pay, without financial compensation.
Right, it's an all-volunteer team, and sometimes funding is precious, and we can't afford to take everybody out for dinner very often. But what makes it, what I did give a lot of thought to that question, and it was fun to think about it. Um, Volunteers are a very diverse group, normally speaking, because they just come forward when they're interested, and I found them to be. The team that we've got is very strong and a talented team, very reliable, which I appreciate. Um, and I find it important to be open minded whenever suggestions are made, and enthusiastic about ideas, even though you might think, oh, that won't work for the following reason. Give it a try. There might be something you haven't thought of. There's some reason that these people are excited about it, and keep an open mind. Um, I find it very helpful to try and discern individual members' learning needs and interests and to provide opportunities for their growth and development within this group whenever possible.
Wonderful. Excellent, Margaret. I wonder whether Kathy, you've got any questions? Does anything come to mind?
I have a couple questions. Like, how many people usually join in your meetings, Margaret?
Well, when we have live meetings, we usually have anywhere from 20 to 35 people, and we sometimes have more, but not normally less than that.
That's great. Um, I also, is this more or less now that you're virtual or?
It's a bit hard to know how many we've got on the virtual list. You
Right.
know, people will comment sometimes, but they don't sign in or anything, so
Okay.
don't really know.
So was that number representative of how many you would have in a live meeting?
It was, yes.
Okay. I wondered, like, when I ran into you guys having a meeting once when I was at another meeting at the same bar.
Oh, yes.
You don't remember, but anyway, okay. Anyway, I wondered how I was thinking, okay, it's at a bar, they would be drinking, it would kind of make things lubricated and flow well. And I wondered how virtual would compare to that, or do I have that wrong?
You mean for the team meetings, or no? You mean
How
for
about for your meeting
the
meetings on
general?
Tuesday nights, right?
Yes. Well, we do miss the live venue, and a lot of people have said that they miss it because of the camaraderie and
Sure.
the just the meeting up with old friends, and it's just a fun sort of thing to do. So a lot of people will be very glad to go live again, which we hope to do in January at Clinton's on Bloor Street at Bloor and Clinton.
Oh, cool.
And when will you resume those in-person events at Clinton?
Tuesday, January the 4th is our target date, but we have another special event coming up on December the 14th. We have what we call Dead Poets Night, which usually draws quite a large crowd, and we have 10 or 12 poets reading the work of poets who are now deceased. That's why we call it Dead Poets
I
Night.
love it.
Yes, and we have a lot of fun at that one. It's usually a good turnout.
Well, by invoking their words, long may the dead poets live, and long may the art bar persist with your directorship and the directorship of those subsequent to you. Margaret Code, thank you for joining me for episode 7 of Talking with the Organizers. Thank you to Kathy Flaxman for offering supplementary
Well,
questions.
thank you for letting me be in on it. It was really fun. I'm really so pleased for poets that they have this group to be part of.
Absolutely. We're birds of a feather, and we're fortunate to be able to occasionally to flock together. Thank you both, and take care.
Thank you.